What's up, everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I'm Kyla Ariel, and this is where all things lifestyle, becoming the best version of you and doing so in a way that feels most authentic, come together as one. I'm excited for today's conversation. Listen, we're talking 5 things that are no longer serving your growth. This conversation right here, it gets me stirred up. It gets me stirred up, and it's honestly because I am someone who has experienced and sometimes still experiences all 5 of these things. I had to look in the mirror and say, Kyla, you gotta let it go. You gotta let it go. It's no longer adding value to your life, and it's genuinely holding you back. So first up on the list, we have the feeling of unworthiness. This is something that I battled with for a very long time, so deeply ingrained, so deeply rooted that sometimes you don't even realize that this is something that you're struggling with. Like, you don't even recognize that it's literally something that is holding you back. And the feeling of unworthiness really does stem from a place of not truly understanding what your worth is, not truly understanding why you are valuable, and then in turn, speaking to yourself in a way where it doesn't translate and you feel like you can't take action because, you don't have the necessary credibility, or you don't have the necessary validation. And because you aren't worth it, then it's like, why even try, right? Like, why even bother? Why even put my best foot forward? And this is something that I realized really was biggest in my life when it came to content creation and being consistent. This was something that also really spoke to me in a space of, or as it related to finances. Like, for a very, very, very long time, I used to pray to God, God, I just need to make or not need, but I just want to experience what it makes to make X amount of dollars, to just feel that I am worthy, just to show me that I am worthy. And it's not necessarily to say dollar signs or, a certain amount of money make you more worth it than not. But again, it's like the self-worth was lacking so much that I didn't even feel like I was worthy of receiving. I didn't even feel like I was worthy of creating and sharing my point of view. One of the things that make us so unique and so different are our lives and how different we are and how set apart we are. We are not created to be the same person. We're not created to be like everyone else, to conform. However, we live a life feeling like, oh, if I don't do things XYZ way, or if I don't have the same thing that another person does, then I'm not worthy. And that is just something that is no longer serving you. Some tangible ways that I was really able to, push aside worthiness or push aside unworthiness were really just acting out of desire, right? Not overthinking, taking the next step, not allowing fear or unpredictability to allow me to feel like, I don't know what's going to happen, so we're just going to play it safe. And I think for me, a lot of what linking playing it safe to worthiness was we don't have room for that. It showed up for me also greatly in my career. There was a point where I had quit my full-time role. We were in the middle of the pandemic. I went 10 months of no full-time employment, where I literally was building my toolkit, building resources to just get to the point where I could step into rooms for interviews and just feel confident, to feel like I knew the value that I brought to the table, and to feel like I would be able to walk in there and really secure the role. And for me, that time frame was just so important because I really understood what it was like to deal with rejection. So again, something that is directly linked to worthiness. When someone tells you no, it's not an automatic sign that you aren't worthy. It just is either not yet, or redirection, or it just wasn't the opportunity for you, and learning that that is okay. And so through that time, I think I was really able to get to the point where I wasn't attaching my worthiness to somebody else's yes. I wasn't attaching my worthiness to how much money I made. I wasn't attaching my worthiness to even what I felt comfortable or what I felt motivated to do in the moment. I was able to, and I am able to, make decisions more freely, to just feel more confident in the way that I'm moving and operating. And I really just feel like not feeling worthy or learning my worthiness, learning my worth was a big shift. Number 2 on my list, we have order, the beauty of order. And you're probably wondering what that means. For me, I have really had to learn that there is a process, whether I like it or not. The recurring theme is unpredictability as it relates to taking the first step. not truly knowing, what's going to happen next, and not allowing that to stop you from trying, to stop you from really moving forward. And as it relates to the beauty of order, I call it the beauty now, because for me, order is almost interchangeable with contentness. And once you learn that there is a specific order that has to happen in life, regardless of whether you like it or not, you almost unlock contentness. Like, you're almost able to sit in this space of just being content because you realize, like, oh, I have to go through this, or I might not be ready for that part of my life, right? I had recently applied for a year-long partnership with Sephora. It is a part of their Sephora Squad program. And I found out that I did not get the opportunity. And while, it's a bummer, I think, again, going through certain points of my life have taught me what rejection really is, and how I can choose to show up and respond to that. But as it relates to the beauty of order, is that the truth was, I just was not ready for that part of my life. While I have been in the content creator space for years, and I have been super passionate, and I've studied this, and I work in social as like a full-time corporate employee, the truth is I have not put in the sweat equity. Like, I had not put in the time necessary, and I had not shown up really ready for the opportunity and to execute it in the best way possible. And that relates to order for me, because everything needs to happen in order. If you're ready to reach that 100K six-figure salary in your career, but you aren't learning the necessary skills to get the role, that is like you're skipping a step. I was skipping a step in applying for an opportunity with Sephora that I would not be 100% ready for, and even sometimes, if we're being honest with ourselves, like capable for. It's one thing to have faith, and it's one thing to even look to God, lean on God for miraculous things to happen, because we know that God is a God of miracles for sure. But it's another to show up day to day, to steward over our lives, to steward over, what our assignments are the right way. And a lot of times that ladders back up to order and understanding that there is order to everything. Number 3, negative thinking. I know. Fan favorite, or maybe it's not the fan favorite, but again, for me, huge. Now, I will say, a lot of my upbringing was deeply rooted in almost needing to be like on defense, right? I'm from a very busy city, a very big city, Chicago. Things are always happening and hustling, bustling. And so I feel like a lot of what that did to me is on one side, mindset always had to be like ready for anything to pop off, ready for anything to happen. And then on another side, we at some point in our lives, at some point in my life, I started to feel like, again, I was not worth XYZ, or I was not capable of doing XYZ, or if I stepped in this direction, then of course something bad would happen, because why not? And for a long time, I honestly tried to mask it as, preparing for the worst, right? At the end of the day, all of these negative thoughts that I was literally ruminating over were not worth it, right? And the truth is, negative thinking is honestly what led me to therapy. I started my therapy journey probably around 2018. I had come back to Dallas post-grad or post-undergrad, post-living in LA, and I was starting to get real familiar with anxious thoughts. I was starting to get real familiar with anxiety, with what anxiety would feel like. And for me, it would be going down these rabbit holes of information like, if I make this move, is it gonna work out? Or, if I do that thing, will it work out? Or no, what's the best or what's the worst case scenario possible? And how can I literally think through every single scenario to make sure that that doesn't happen to me, when in reality, it didn't even exist. And one of the major keys to learning that negative thinking was holding me back was because I was spending so much time thinking about the non-existent things, thinking about, what was not positive, or thinking about what I had to do to make sure that I would be able to get out of some random scenario that did not exist. And for me, negative thinking also was hurting relationships, because again, I would always find myself on the defense mode, or trying to figure out how I would navigate a certain negative situation that didn't exist. And I don't know, again, therapy, highly recommended for everyone, but negative thinking was definitely something that I had to rid of. And also even being or associating myself with people who would trigger negative thinking in me or for me. Because, sometimes even our family and friends, they don't understand or realize what projection is doing to us. But when you're in that space of growth, when you're in that space of trying to let something go, especially something as sensitive as negative thinking, anything can be triggering for you. Anything could be, that one detail that stopped you from taking a step forward, but instead knocked you 3 steps back. And so for me, it was just a really big one. There's a difference between the truth and having to accept the truth and navigate through that, versus just completely approaching life from a cynical point of view, from a negative point of view, and not really even giving yourself the opportunity to see it from a different light. And so everything for me has been about perspective, right? Like, how did I shift that negative thinking? How did I stop approaching life from a perspective of negativity? Well, honestly, almost like shifting, not necessarily by seeing the silver lining in everything, right? Because there is a kind of gray area, blurred line between like what they're calling now like toxic positivity and looking at everything like super positive when the truth is that it's not. That's not what I'm suggesting. But what I am suggesting is that when it comes to negative thinking, sometimes the truth is the truth and it stops there. It doesn't mean that your feelings have to take over. It doesn't mean that your feelings are facts. Sometimes the truth is just a moment of like, this is the honest truth. This is what is realistically happening. And then you can choose from there, like what the next step is. And so for me, a lot of it is perspective. We go back to like the Sephora squad example I gave, right? Man, I could have jumped into those negative thoughts immediately. And it's not to say that like there were some that bubbled up or there were some that came about. But the truth is I knew from that point like what the assignment was, regardless of what the answer is or what somebody else's yes is. The truth is you get to choose how you react and show up from that point. And as it relates to negative thinking for me, I knew like, hey, if I get this opportunity or not, I know that I still have to show up in my content. Like I know that there is a level of consistency that I want to achieve. And most importantly, I want to be in the position where like I knew I put my best foot forward and that was not the case. And so that's more so looking at it from like the realistic point of view. And I think that sometimes that like translates into more of a positive approach for me personally. Number 4, making excuses for being disciplined. Yikes. Okay, so this one is like right here for me, because this is the most disciplined I have had to be in my entire life. And not to mention, there was a whole year that I lived that was dedicated to just learning discipline. And it's so interesting how, I don't know if you all have read the book or heard of the book Atomic Habits. I can't think of the author right now, but I will link it in the description. I'm gonna be honest, I never finished it, but I know a lot of people who love it. I did start it, and I think that a lot of like that thinking and ideology I really related with because of like how I was living my life. Anywho, so back at the start of 2021, I want to say, I don't know if y'all like, when you start in a new year, you kind of give yourself a word for the year. I probably started that in like 2019 maybe, but in 2021, I feel like very strongly that God told me my word of the year was discipline. And I was not excited. I was not excited because discipline has always felt very, very hard for me. And when I think about discipline, I also think about how like it makes me cringe. Like when I was coming out of college, or I would be in college and I'd be looking at like internships and job applications, or even like post undergrad, right? And it'd be like self-starterness. I'd be like, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be a self-starter. Like, and that sounds crazy to say out loud now, but I genuinely, if I'm being honest, I genuinely had to wrap my mind around what it meant to be a self-starter, but most importantly, not rely on motivation, not rely on extenuating circumstances, not rely on like outside forces, but be able to dig deep within myself and be like, all right, you got to do X, Y, and Z. Let's get up and let's get it done. And for me, if I'm also being honest, it took time. I started the year 2021 knowing that was my year of discipline, and I ended the year knowing that was just the beginning. And it's crazy because I thought like, oh, this is the year I'm gonna go into being disciplined. Everything's gonna be perfect. We're gonna end the year and I'm gonna have it all figured out. It was just the start. But what I will say is that when I think about like from a life application standpoint, right, like getting into becoming my most disciplined self, it really started small. It was the incremental commitment over time that really allowed me to be like, okay, I'm gonna start with this, and then I'm gonna add on. And then I'm gonna start, I'm gonna build on from this, and then I'm gonna add on. And so it's almost like, you're taking the first step, and then you're taking the next, and then you're taking the next. But everything that you did before is also combined with the next step that you're taking. Therefore, it's like you're growing into, multiple things at once versus, which is something that we do, trying to do it all at once over X amount of time. Like, oh, I want to lose 25 pounds. So I'm about to be eating clean. I'm about to be going to the gym 5 days of the week. I'm about to be cutting out, alcohol or certain types of foods. I'm gonna go cold turkey. And you get to day 3 and you're like, this is hard. This is hard. Understandably so, right? But it's because of the difference in our mindset when we approach things from like, again, small habits, or like, that's why I mentioned the book, Atomic Habits, taking smaller habits and increasing and adding to those over time. Chef's kiss, cheat code. Like I literally just surprised myself over time. I think I started, one of the areas where I knew would help with me being most disciplined came with going to the gym. There was something about like strength and testing like my physical strength that also made me mentally strong. And so I started going to the gym maybe, let's say, like 3 times a week, and then I added on a 4th day, and then I added on a 5th day. And then another thing that's also real about discipline, and honestly everything that we've talked about up to this point, is that being honest with yourself. Like being honest with yourself about what you need, like what are the points or positions that you can place around you to make sure that you are operating as your best self. For me, if we take going to the gym in that example, I'm not the girl that's gonna go to the gym, like the 24-hour fitness, the LA Fitness, the Lifetime Fitness, you name it. I'm not about to go there 5 days a week, create my own workout and like be motivated. I'm sorry. I also need pre-workout. Like I'm not just naturally motivated. So I knew going to the gym 3 times a week, I had to have a trainer or some type of like group class or some type of environment that was, it was motivating and it was like exciting to be in. And I also had someone give me instruction. So that way all I had to do was show up, because showing up is the hardest part. All I had to do was show up and then take it from there. So that's what I mean when I say like, what are ways that you can get honest with yourself about what you need to succeed, and also what are ways that you can start small to really just grow your discipline over time. So we've talked about a feeling of unworthiness, we've talked about the beauty of order, we've talked about negative thinking, and we've talked about waiting to become disciplined. Number 5 is going to be the opinion of others. Boy, honestly, all 5 of these have wrecked me. They sometimes wreck me on different days, same day. Sometimes I'm feeling great. Sometimes I'm like, I'm struggling. This one right here, oh, I can think of so many different occasions where I care too much about what other people thought of me. And it starts, right? Like as a kid, you want to impress your peers. You want to make your parents happy. And then it grows into, tap dancing along in life for everybody. And now you're trying to impress your boss and you overworking, you staying late to make sure that like they view you a certain way. Or, we get on social media and we're living a certain life and a highlight reel there, but not really like taking care of our day-to-day in our real lives. And that's just honestly like a very, very high level of what it's like to care about the opinion of others, or taking too much consideration of others' opinions. But from a very like deeply rooted level, if you think about it, are you making decisions for you? Are you living a life that you feel proud of? Not what other people on social media think, not what other people, friends and family think, but are you making decisions that make you most happy, that make the most sense for your life, right? Like We just gave the example of, or we talked about the example of being in the gym and creating an atmosphere that makes sense for you to succeed. It's the same thinking here. Like, are you so concerned with other people's opinions that you're distracting yourself from your next best step or from truly reaching your highest potential because your energy and your thinking is all filled up with what other people's preferences for you are, or what other people or things have been projected onto you. And so this one for me, I think, was so big because, again, as a creator, as someone who wants to show up consistently, because I understand that there is fruitfulness in like what I have to share and just my interests and truly being passionate about creating. When it would come to just like doing it, right? Like just hopping on camera and talking, or hopping on the podcast and talking, like getting to that point of even starting, like getting to the point of even like, okay, you had the thought, now we're gonna do the first thing. That becoming such a big gap because I'm literally like, oh, okay, I thought about it. Now wait, what do other people think? And what if, and this, and what if I say this way? And what, I mean, like we haven't even recorded. And so I got to a point where I'm like, I don't care. And honestly, if I'm being 100% frank, some days I do, but it's not enough to make me feel as though like I can't start, I can't get into it, I can't find my flow, I can't find my rhythm, right? And the truth is, like, we're all created to be set apart. We were all created with our own purpose. We were all created with our own assignment and our own lives to steward over. And if we're so focused on impressing others or caring what other people have to say, then like, what are we doing? Why are we here? And so honestly, all 5 of these things, I feel like they go together in my life, right? Like if it's not one thing, it's another. Or like caring too much about people's opinions leads into negative thinking, which leads into not being disciplined because I no longer feel like it, which leads into like, again, being at a point where I'm not even giving myself the opportunity to show up as my best self. That's not fair to anyone. It really isn't. And I think a lot of what we are rooting our self-worthiness in, a lot of what we are feeling like we are capable of doing, a lot of what we are feeling, or even like getting to the point of being able to recognize the truth, right? I mentioned earlier, like there's process to everything, and sometimes in that process, or there's order to everything, and sometimes in that order, it's just being honest with yourself. If you are overly consumed with other people's honest opinions about you, how are you being honest with yourself? How are you able to identify, what is that next step that you need to take? And so I honestly look at these things almost like a cycle, now that I'm just like saying it out loud, right? Almost like a cycle. It starts at, other people's opinions, and then negative thoughts, and then now I don't feel worthy, and now I don't feel motivated, and I should be here by now. If I would have just, and it's like we're constantly like going in on ourselves. And in actuality, it doesn't have to be that way. And so I hope that today this conversation encourages you and helps you recognize that these don't have to be the case. You don't have to stay here. You don't have to sit in these things. It's okay to tell yourself, no, I'm not gonna think negative today. Or, you know what, I don't feel the most motivated, but I know that my goal is to get to the gym 3 times a week. And just starting, right? Like just taking the first step, just giving yourself the opportunity to say, I'm going to try this regardless of how I feel. Like I'm going to put myself out there regardless of what the circumstances may be. And I just want you to give yourself the opportunity and see how far you get. Thank you for tuning into today's conversation around the 5 things that are no longer serving your growth. Listen, I know that you are highly capable. I know that you are more than capable of taking a moment to reflect, to really recognize what are the things that aren't working for you, what are the things that are no longer serving you. I encourage you to write them down, because starting today, oh baby, they don't have a place to live. They don't have a place to stay. It is my hope, it's my desire, and I really just want to encourage you to take that next step, to be honest and be on your road to becoming the best version of you.